Hello, sisters. This is the Watch Maiden, and here we are with part 2 of historical writings about head coverings and Christian women. So, before I read a little bit from an old book that has recently been printed, and then I read some writings from some early church fathers, etc. And now I'm going to read some quotes from some commentaries. And just kind of like I said, there's so much material, and it's just so much that I'm just taking out the pieces that speak directly of the head covering for a woman, because otherwise we'd be here all day. And so here we go. Now, Thomas Goodwin, he was also known as the Elder. He was an English Puritan theologian and preacher. He was born in 1600 and died in 1680 AD. 1680 AD. And he says, he biddeth women, speaking of Paul, he biddeth women to be modest, to be veiled, to show subjection, not only because of men, but because of the angels. Now, Thomas Adams, he was an English clergyman and a reputed preacher. He was called the Shakespeare of the Puritans. He was born in 1583 and died in 1653. He says, his comments regarding this is that a woman throwing off the veil of modesty and token of subjection to her husband doth make even the angels of heaven witness of her dissolute contumacy. Okay, so that's just showing that he's saying in 1583, or whenever he wrote this, which I don't know what the year was, but it was around the time, you know, the late 1500s, early 1600s, that the woman should not throw off her veil. Okay. So George Swinnock, he was an author, a chaplain, and a vicar, and he was born in 1627 and died in 1673. He says, first, in honoring her husband's person, the Persian ladies have the resemblance of a foot worn in the top of their coronets, in token that the top of their glory doth stoop to their husband's feet. The moon, in the sun's absence, takes upon her the government of the heavens, that in his presence she veils herself. So speaking about the sun and the moon and such. The wife next to her husband shines in her house, far above all the stars which are fixed there. But God hath appointed that she give place to her husband, and be willing to prefer him. Rebekah, when she approached Isaac, took a veil and covered her head, in token of subjection to her husband. And for this cause, namely, in sign of subjection, ought the woman to have power, that is, a veil, over their heads. Okay? Now, Thomas Manton, he was an English Puritan clergyman, born in 1620 to 1677 is when he died. He says, as the apostle saith in 1 Corinthians 10:10, the woman ought to have power on her head because of the angels. In the assembly there you meet the angels and devils. Angels to observe your garb and carriage, and devils to tempt you. Therefore, be covered because of the angels. Yet usually women come hither with shameless impudence into the presence of God, men, and angels. This is a practice that neither suits with modesty nor conveniency. Nothing can be alleged for it but reasons of pride and wantonness. It feeds your own pride and provokes lust in others. You would think they were wicked women that should offer others poison to drink. They that do that which is worse, lay a snare for the soul. Uncover that which should be covered, lest you provoke others to your rank to imitate your vanity. Lest you provoke others of your rank to imitate your vanity, if they should not by the fear of God be guarded from unclean thoughts and filthy desires. Now, Christians should be far from allowing sin in themselves or provoking it in others. And I'd like to I got strong opinions on this. I believe they're biblical. No hate, please. But sometimes you hear a Christian woman say, it ain't my fault if he's lusting. Well, it ain't my problem if he's looking at me and he's like lusting. It's his problem, not mine. I hear that. I've heard that, oh my goodness, so many times. And you know, I used to kind of agree a little, because I had issues with men in general because of things that had happened to me. And sometimes I would be like, men are just pigs, blah, you know, and I just, you know, that was before God straightened me out. But, so if you're saying, I can't imagine any of my sisters here whom I've addressed this to are even saying that, but obviously, because you're seeking modesty. But there are Christian women who say, it ain't my fault. It is not my fault if he's lusting and they got the tight clothes on and cleavage and the whole 9 yards. Oh, goodness gracious. That is just so heartbreaking. You know, I don't even know. I just don't even know it. I'm just saying, yeah, it is your fault. You know, if you say that, Lord help you. You know, I pray that you repent. We are not to put a stumbling block before anyone, before a brother, before a sister, anybody. And you know, men are made a certain way. Yes, they are very visual, and that is not their fault. You know, but the thing is that up until around the 1920s, you know, Christianity and in general any moral world, any society that had a moral compass, people dressed modestly. They weren't hanging everything out for everybody to see. It just was not happening unless they were prostitutes. And so there was propriety. Men were not bombarded with this stuff, you know, 24/7 like they are now. And, you know, I mean, they say that there's such an addiction to pornography because of the internet that over 80%, or maybe if it's even 90% of men are like addicted, and even Christian men and pastors, you know. And if those women quit doing what they were doing in pornography, and if women went around modestly dressed and covered, could you imagine the difference in our society? It would just be incredible. I just couldn't even imagine. And last night we were out, and now you know, I dress modestly. I normally, you know, I talked before, I wear skirts to the, you know, usually ankle, shins. You know, I wear shirts to below my elbows and such, and I cover. And a lot of times I worry, like, I'm not attracted to my husband. He says I am, and, you know, and everything. But, you know, you go out and then there's these women, and they're dressed certain ways and whatever. And I know I could look just as good if I do that kind of thing. Well, we were out, and my husband was like at one part here. We were in the produce bread area of the store, and my husband was here, and I was like over here. And then a woman walked in, you know, and I saw her first walk in. It was kind of like the way it all happened was really quick. I kind of saw her, and I kind of looked over and saw my husband over here, and he was over near the bread. And well, right when I looked over at him, he was not looking at the woman, but all of a sudden in his peripheral vision it caught his eye, and he looked. And because she had long hair, but she was dressed in very tight clothing, and she had lots of makeup on, and just really tight, and high heels and all that. And so it was like our men, they, even in the peripheral vision, it's instinct. They just go, they look, it's like without even thinking it happens, right? Well, he looked, yeah, and then I happened to look at him at that time, and so I saw that, and I saw him look, and then I looked over at her again, then I looked back at him, and he couldn't see me. So he could see me, but he wasn't looking at me, so he didn't know that I was like just looking at this, and it was just not like I was like, oh, what's she doing? But it was just interesting the way this all happened. So I just happened to look at him, and then he looked at her, he went like that and looked for a second, and then he went, and then I was like, and then he caught my eye, and then he turned and looked at me, and he didn't know I had looked at her or whatever, but then he went like that, he looked at me, and he went like that, and like, and you know, whatever, and then he goes, and then he looked at, and then he goes to me, he looks at me, and he looks me up and down and goes, you know, and it was so funny. So basically, because my husband has really, because of the change in me with the way that the change that has come character-wise and spiritually wise and such, that has come with head covering, with modest dressing and such, he's just come to cherish that and love that. And when he sees the women that aren't like that, you know, that they're trying to draw sexual attention to themselves, he's actually like sort of repulsed by it, you know. And but he still will look. He'll look because he's a man. Like if he sees it, he'll look. But then he's just kind of like, ugh, because he's getting used to this purity that's in me, you know, and I don't say that in a bragging way. I hope you know what I mean. But that's what we have the power to do for our husbands, okay? So we have the power, so much power in our hands with how we behave and how we adorn ourselves, and how it affects men, our husbands, how it affects our sons, because it will affect what they see as what you represent and what kind of a woman they would want, and then how it would affect our brothers at church or whatever, how it affects worldly men and everything. And we really need to be super conscious of that. And oh man, I felt like I had so much to say about that. It kind of fell out of my head, and I'm kind of meandering, and I'm probably not making any sense. I've got so much on my mind with this trip that I'm doing. But anyways, to say that we're not, you know, it's not our fault if we're causing somebody to lust, that is just so bad. It is so bad. It isn't our fault if he has a lust problem, but we don't need to add to the problem. Okay, just give the brother a break, and don't add to the problem, and just be modest for God's sake, for your husband's sake, for your own sake. It's just a better way. It just really is. That kind of attention that you get from, you know, men like that, it's so fleeting and it's so unfulfilling. It feels exciting at the moment, but it leaves you empty. And, you know, it just makes you look like a piece of meat and stuff. And that's why I get it when they talk about in the Bible about, you know, let it be the inward thing coming out. Let that be your beauty, like our mother Sarah, because it really is when you become around a woman who has learned to do that, it's sort of a breathtaking thing. It's sort of a really amazing thing, and it really makes, it's a really contrast from the other way. You know what I'm saying? And it's just a really big deal. But you know, it was interesting in here where he said that the devils tempt you. And I thought, wow, you know, angels and devils are present with us at all times, here in our home, at church, wherever we go. You know, this spiritual world, this invisible world is all around us. And so when it talks about because of the angels, you know, we talked about, is it the good angels, is it the bad angels? And I thought, well, I thought about it, you know, I thought it could be for the good angels, and I also thought it could be for the bad angels because of the Genesis 6, you know, with the devils, the angels that looked upon the women and lusted after them and married them and had relations with them. But I didn't think about it where it could be the devil's in church service, you know, and there's a brother that already may have a problem, and then he goes, look at her, look at that, whispers that stuff, and then you're the object of that. We don't want that. We don't want that. You know, oh, it's just so much more amazing and wonderful to be modest and godly, and to be that example. And it shows so much love and respect for our fellow brothers, you know, that we're not putting an occasion to stumble in front of them. What a lovely thing that is. We need to be, that power we hold. We just hold men in that power of our beauty and our attraction and our ability to attract and stuff. And it's so, it's just so powerful. We just really need to be aware of that and handle that power. You know what I mean? In a very godly manner. So anyhow, now John Calvin, he was a French theologian, pastor, and reformer in Geneva during the Protestant Reformation. He was born in 1509 and died in 1564. Now he says, his commentary is that if the woman uncovers her head, she shakes off subjection involving contempt of her husband. Okay, and then it says, when he quotes, "For it is all one as if she were shaven," he now maintains from other considerations, he's saying that Paul says that it is unseemly for women to have heads bare. Nature itself teaches, says he, nature itself says he abhors it. To see a woman shaven is a spectacle that is disgusting and monstrous. It really is. Hence we infer that the woman has her hair given for a covering. Should anyone now object that her hair is enough as being natural covering, Paul says that it is not. For it is such a covering as requires another thing to be made use of for covering it, and hence a conjecture is drawn, with some appearance of probability, that women who had beautiful hair were accustomed to uncover their heads for the purpose of showing off their beauty. It is not therefore without good reason that Paul, as a remedy for this vice, sets before them the opposite idea, that they be regarded as remarkable for unseemliness, rather than for what is an incentive to lust. So it's very, very clear. This long hair, this beautiful glory, it causes men to lust. I mean, and if you think about it, really, in like pornography and in movies that are like high sexual content, etc., in general, do you see the woman who, like, you know, for advertising sexy things like bikinis or anything, does she ever have like a butch man, you know, Air Force haircut, like a man's Air Force haircut? No way. Her hair is flowing and whoo and sexy and hanging down her naked body and whatever, you know. It's a very powerful thing. We don't want it to be an incentive to lust, okay? For this cause ought the woman to have power, he says. From what authority, Paul draws an argument in favor of outward decorum. She is subject, says he, let her then wear a token of subjection. In the term power, there is an instance of metonymy, for he means a token by which she declares herself to be under the power of her husband. And it is a covering, whether it be a robe or a veil, or any other kind of covering. When women assume a higher place than becomes them, they gain this by it, that they discover their impudence in the view of the angels of heaven. Okay? So now, Dr. John Gill, who was an English Baptist pastor, a biblical scholar and theologian, and he was born in 1697 and died in 1771, he says, any woman that joins in public worship with the minister in prayer and attends on the hearing of the word preached or sings the praises of God with a congregation, as we have seen, the word prophesying signifies, with her head uncovered. It may seem strange from whom the Corinthian women should take up this custom, since the Jewish women were not allowed to go into the streets or into any open and public place unveiled. So we see here again that the Jewish women, and even the women of Israel prior, always covered publicly and in worship. It was a Jewish law that they should go out nowhere bareheaded. Yea, it was reckoned scandalous and ignominious to do so. Hence it is said that uncovering of the head is a reproach to the daughters of Israel, and concerning the adulterous woman, it is represented as said by the priest, Thou hast separated from the way of the daughters of Israel, for the way or custom of the daughters of Israel to have their heads covered, but thou hast gone in the way of the Gentiles, who walk with bare head. So that there it should seem that these Corinthians followed the examples of the heathens. But then, though it might be the custom of some nations for women to go abroad bareheaded, yet at their solemnities, where and when they were admitted, for they were not everywhere and always, they used to attend with their heads veiled and covered. Mr. Meade takes notice indeed of some heathen priestesses who used to perform their religious rites and sacrifices with open face and their hair hanging down and locks spreading, in imitation of whom these women at Corinth are thought to act. However, whoever behaved in this uncomely manner, whose example soever she followed, the apostle says, dishonoreth her head. Not her husband, who is her head in a figurative sense, and is dishonored by her not being covered, as if she was not subject to him, or because more beautiful than he, and therefore shows herself, but her natural head, as appears from the reason given. For that is even all one as if she were shaven. To be without a veil, or some sort of covering on her head, according to the custom of the country, is the same thing as if her head was shaved. And everyone knows how dishonorable and scandalous it is for a woman to have her head shaved. And if this is the same, then it is dishonorable and scandalous to her to be without covering in public worship. And this shows that the natural head of the man is meant in the preceding verse, since the natural head of the woman is meant in this. Okay? So it's kind of going about what we learned before, that they were going in public, covered, many of them, and then they would come in to worship and bare their heads the way the heathen would, the pagan women would, and have their hair hanging down. And Paul was addressing this specifically to help remedy this and let them understand that it wasn't proper for them to do that. For if the woman be not covered, that is, if her head is not covered with some sort of covering, as is the custom of the place where she lives. So, in different places they covered in different ways, but they covered. And then he says, let her also be shorn. Let her hair be cut short. Okay? Let her wear it as men do theirs. Now, he gets a little, kind of sarcastic or whatever here, but this is how serious they were about this. He says, Let her hair be cut short. Let her wear it as men do theirs, and let her see how well she will look, and how she will like that, and how she will be looked upon and liked by others. Everybody will laugh at her, and she will be ashamed of herself. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, as it is counted in all civilizations, the very heathen speak of it as a thing abominable, and of which there should be not one single dreadful example, then let her be covered with a veil, or any sort of covering in common use. Okay? Then, I'm getting at 20 minutes here, so I'm going to have to cut this off here in a bit and start part 3, I guess. But the woman is the glory of the man, being made out of him and for his help and assistance, and to be a crown of honor and glory to him. The apostle speaks the sense and in the language of the Jews. The words in Isaiah 44:13, after the figure of a man, according to the beauty of a man, are by the Targum rendered after the likeness of a man, after the glory of a woman. And the note of a famous interpreter of theirs upon the last clause is, this is the woman who is the glory of her husband. But why is she to be covered for this reason, when the man is to be uncovered? It is to be observed that it is in the presence and worship of God that the one is to be uncovered and the other covered. The one being the glory of God, and therefore to be uncovered before him, and the other the glory of man, and therefore to be covered before God. And especially, since being first in the transgression, she who is man's glory has been the means of his shame and disgrace. The Jews seem to make this the reason for the difference. They ask, why does a man go out with his head uncovered, and a woman with her head covered? It is answered, it is like to one that has committed a sin, and he is ashamed of the children of men. Therefore she goes with her head covered. And then he says, but the woman of the man, she was made out of his rib, and took both her name and nature from him. God was the author, and man the matter of her being. Her original under God is owing to him. And therefore, as he was first in being, he must be superior to her. This serves to prove all that has yet been stated. As that man is the head of the woman is the glory of man, what he may glory in as being from him. And therefore, there should not be this difference in their appearance in public worship. So, really important about this distinction. When you're in a worship, in my opinion in general, there's the man, short hair, woman, long hair, covering, modest dress, etc. A dress, a very, very distinct. Far, far, far away, you can look and you can see, there's a man, there's a woman. It's very important to him, this distinction between the sexes. And, that's why things that are going on today, it's just, I won't go there. And so because of the angels, now he kind of discusses the opinions that have been discussed about what is this because of the angels mentioned in 1 Corinthians 11. Some in a proper sense of the angels, and these either good or bad. And he says Tertullian understands them of evil angels, and that a woman should cover her head in time of worship, lest they lust after her, though much rather the reason should be lest they should irritate and provoke lust in others. So that's interesting because, like we said, the devils are present, and then we don't want them to tap a brother on the shoulder and incite him to lust. Look at that sister. Look at her curvy bottom. Look at her chest. Look at her beautiful long hair, and then begin to fantasize in his mind about it. We just don't want to do that. Those devils will provoke him, especially if he's already got a problem in that area. Okay. So though they much rather the reason should be lest they irritate and provoke him lust in others, but it is better to understand them of good angels. So he's saying this, that who attend the assemblies of the saints and observe the air and behavior of the worshippers. Wherefore women should cover their heads with respect to them, and not give offense to those pure spirits by an indecent appearance. It is agreeable to the notion of the Jews that angels attend public prayers, and at the expounding of the word they often speak of an angel that is appointed over prayers. Hence, Tertullian seems to have took his notion of an angel of prayer and of angels being present at expounding of the scripture. So, moreover, the veiling of a woman in public worship because of angels may be an imitation of the good angels, who, when they sung the praises of God and adored and glorified his perfections, covered their faces and their feet with their wings. Isaiah 6:1. Many understanding these words in a figurative sense, and in this also they are not agreed. Some, okay, so he goes on to this, that some also by the word angels think young men are meant. So there's the thought that it could be the bad angels, it could be the good angels, and he's thinking it's the young men. The young men are meant, who for their gracefulness and comeliness are compared to angels. Others good men in general that attend religious worship, others ministers of the word, called angels often in the book of Revelations, which last seem to be most agreeable of any of these senses. And the women were to cover their heads, that they might not offend either of these or stir up any impure desires in them. So he goes on to believe that, it would stir up things in the men. And we just don't want to do that. The young men, the old men, the ministers, anything like that. Okay, for her hair is given her for a covering. He states, not instead of a covering for her head or any other part of her body, so that she needs no other. We read indeed of the daughter of Nicodemus Ben Gurion, that she was obliged to make use of her hair for a covering in such a sense. So in this particular case, this woman, she was poor and she didn't have a covering, and she used her hair for a covering. What happened? It happened to Ar Yohanan ben Zakkai, and I think Ar is for Ravi or Rabbi or Rav, but I don't want to butcher it, so I'm just going to say Ar. So Ar Yohanan ben Zakkai, that he rode upon an ass and went out of Jerusalem, and his disciples went after him. And he saw a young woman gathering barley corns out of the dung of the Arabian cattle. When she saw him, she covered herself with her hair and stood before him. But this covering was made use of, not by choice, but by force, through her poverty, she having no other. This was not the custom of the nation, nor was the hair given to women for